My childhood neighbor harassed me since I was a kid, so I set a trap and nailed his confession on tape. 2 years later, he tried to blackmail me with new evidence, and I had it sealed as Exhibit A. I was tanning by the pool with a book covering my face when someone walked up to me and licked my shoulder. It was a part of my skin that was extremely raw and sunburnt, so my immediate reaction was to slap him. I didn't even realize it was a child until I heard the tears. His nose had somehow already started to bleed, and everybody turned to face us. "Yo, did that bitch just hit a child?" I heard one of the guys yell, and before I could say anything, the kid just yelled, "This cell just hit me." Suddenly, his dad came stomping over towards me and handed me a piece of paper. "Write down your contact details because we're suing you." Well, I had just downed 7 glasses of Aperol Spritz, so I was in no position to argue. Drunk me wrote down my full name, address, and phone number. They left right after, and I was so woozy that I tried to go back to sleep. Except when I woke up, my bikini wasn't on anymore, and I was completely unclothed. Luckily, the pool was completely empty, and no one had seen other than a creep jerking it on the other side of the pool. I immediately covered up and went inside. Like, what the actual F was going on? I felt like I was in a bad dream or something. I tried to take a cold shower and sober up when suddenly black vomit began to pour out of my throat. There was so much liquid it could have hydrated the entire continent of Africa. That's when I realized my drink had been spiked. I immediately turned on my phone, trying to research my symptoms and find out what substance I had taken. And that's when I noticed my phone had been spammed with notifications. Instagram was the first app I clicked. I had gained 99 plus followers, with dozens of DM requests. Someone had posted my unclothed body by the pool on my page, and tagged all of my followers in the comment section, including my boyfriend. I thought back to that kid, the details I had written down. I had to stop myself from punching a hole in the wall with my skull, because I had felt so guilty for hitting his child, that I not only gave away every social media handle I had, but the passwords for each account too. And now here he was, ruining my life, and I had no one to blame but myself. After burying my head in my hands and having a "why does this shit always happen to me" moment, I tried to delete everything, and I guess he had noticed that I was active, because suddenly I was logged out, and the password was changed too. I splashed some cold water in my face and pinched myself until I bruised just to prove to myself that I wasn't hallucinating. I tried to FaceTime my boyfriend and explain what happened. "Oh, thank gosh you picked up. I don't want to hear it," he interrupted. He told me that we had already talked about me in revealing clothing, and I was an effing embarrassment. And when I broke down in tears trying to explain everything, he burst out laughing, right in my face. This is actually a really entertaining lie, but F you. He then hung up and blocked me on everything. That's when I finally got the text that explained everything. It was an unknown number, but I'd recognize that formal writing anywhere. I knew it was my ex-neighbor, Tom. It read, "May I inquire whether you are now prepared to formally accept my offer?" As soon as I read it, I grabbed the pillow of the hotel room and started banging it against the walls. You see, Tom was a guy that lived beside my childhood home. I was 5 and he was 12 when we started hanging out, and I always saw him as a sort of big brother. But when I turned 8, he brought me flowers and asked me to be his girlfriend. And even though I was a child, I knew it was wrong, because my teacher had given us dozens of talks on grooming and age-appropriate relations. So I told him no, but that we could still be friends. I still remember the coldness in his voice when he replied with, "Don't worry, one day you'll change your mind." At the time, I shrugged it off, not knowing the weight of his words. But ever since then, he has made my life hell. He has turned every friend that I've made against me, got me expelled from high school, pulled strings to make every community college in the tri-state area blacklist me from attending. I tried to get a restraining order, but he had cleared all the evidence and the police thought he was just some misunderstood boy who had a crush on me. So now here I was, 20 years later, trying to start a new life in a whole different continent, and Tom was still alive and stalking me, punishing me for rejecting him all those years ago, still trying to change my mind. So I replied with one simple word, yes, because I was about to ruin him back. Tom replied almost instantly with an address and a time. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., some fancy restaurant downtown. I knew this was stupid. I knew I should just pack up and leave again, but I was so tired of running, so tired of starting over every few years. Plus my boyfriend had just dumped me, and my entire social media presence was destroyed. What else did I have to lose at this point? I spent the rest of the night trying to figure out what Tom's game was. He'd been doing this for years. Every time I got comfortable somewhere, he'd show up and mess everything up. In college, he'd spread rumors about me. At my first job, he somehow got photos of me partying and sent them to my boss. When I moved to Chicago, he found out where I worked and called in fake complaints until they fired me. The guy was relentless. I remembered how he'd even shown up at my parents' funeral 3 years ago, standing in the back row like he belonged there. The nerve of him. The next morning, I woke up feeling like garbage. My head was pounding from whatever substance he'd slipped me. The hotel room spun when I tried to sit up too fast. I checked my phone and saw dozens of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably people who saw those photos. I ignored them all and started getting ready for this meeting. I picked out the most conservative outfit I had, black pants and a button-up shirt. No way was I giving him any ammunition. I got to the restaurant early and waited outside. The place was one of those upscale spots with valet parking and a dress code. My plan was simple. Record everything on my phone. Get him to admit what he'd been doing all these years. Then finally have enough evidence for a restraining order, maybe even criminal charges. I was done being his victim. Tom showed up exactly at 2 p.m. He looked exactly the same as the last time I'd seen him 5 years ago. Same stupid haircut, same creepy smile, same way of walking like he owned the world. He walked up to me like we were old friends meeting for lunch. "Emma, so wonderful to see you again," he said. His voice still had that same condescending tone that made my skin crawl. I wanted to punch him, but I kept my cool. We went inside and sat down at a table in the corner. He ordered for both of us without asking asking what I wanted. Typical Tom, always had to be in control. When the waiter left, he leaned back in his chair and just stared at me. You look tired, he said. Long night? I gripped my water glass so hard I thought it might break. Cut the crap, Tom. What do you want? He laughed and pulled out his phone. Started scrolling through photos. My photos. From Instagram. From Facebook. Even some I'd never posted anywhere. Photos from my apartment. Photos of me sleeping. I want what I've always wanted, Emma. You. I felt sick to my stomach. That's never going to happen, I told him. He just smiled wider. Oh, but it will. See, I have everything now. Your photos, your messages, your entire digital life. And if you don't agree to date me, I'll make sure everyone you've ever known sees exactly what kind of person you really are. I started recording on my phone under the table. So you're blackmailing me? He shook his head. No. I'm giving you a choice. Be with me or watch your life fall apart. Again. The food arrived, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was in knots. The smell of the expensive steak he'd ordered for me made me want to throw up. How did you even find me this time? I asked. He looked so proud of himself. Your cousin Linda posted a photo of you two at that hotel pool last week, tagged the location and everything. After that, it was easy. I wanted to scream. One stupid photo and he'd found me again. The kid at the pool. That was you? He nodded. My nephew, actually. Sweet kid. Very good at following directions. I felt my anger building. You drugged me. You took those photos. He held up his hands. Prove it. All anyone saw was you getting hammered and taking your clothes off by the pool. Classic Emma behavior, if you ask me. I pushed my plate away and stood up, the scraping of the chair against the tile floor making several diners turn their heads. I'm leaving. But Tom grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make a point. His fingers were cold, like he'd been holding his water glass too long. Sit down, Emma. We're not done talking. I yanked my arm away and sat back down, my skin crawling where he'd touched me. People were starting to look at us. The last thing I needed was another scene. Another moment that would somehow get twisted and used against me later. Here's what's going to happen, Tom continued, leaning forward so only I could hear him. His cologne was the same one he'd worn in high school, something expensive and overpowering that made my stomach turn. You're going to move back home. We're going to start dating, and eventually we're going to get married, just like it was always supposed to be. I laughed, actually laughed in his face. The sound came out harsh and bitter, nothing like my real laugh. You're insane, he shrugged, that infuriating little half smile playing at his lips. Maybe, but I'm also the guy with all your passwords, all your photos, all your secrets. I tried to think of a way out, my mind racing through possibilities and coming up empty. My phone was still recording under the table, hidden beneath my napkin. At least I'd have proof of this conversation. What if I just disappear again? Change my name? Start completely over? Tom shook his head slowly, like he was disappointed in me for even suggesting it. I'll find you. I always do. Plus I have your parents' address, your sister Barbara's address, your best friend Angela's address. You really want to drag them into this? That's when I realized how deep I was in. This wasn't just about me anymore. My throat felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. You wouldn't, but I knew he would. Tom had already proven he'd do anything to get what he wanted. The waiter approached our table, probably sensing the tension, but Tom waved him away without even looking. Try me, he said, his voice soft but menacing. Or we can do this the easy way. Date me for 6 months. If you still don't love me after that, I'll leave you alone forever. I'll delete everything. You have my word. His word meant nothing, but I needed time to figure this out. Time to think, to plan, to find some way out of this nightmare that had been my life for 2 decades. I need to think about it. Tom checked his watch. A Rolex, of course. He'd always liked expensive things. Status symbols that proved he was somebody important. You have until midnight. Text me your answer or those photos go viral. And not just on your accounts. I'm talking about sending them to your employer, your landlord, everyone. I stood up again and this time he let me go. My legs felt shaky, like they might not hold me. Oh, and Emma, he called after me. Don't bother going to the police. I've made sure they won't believe you. Again, I practically ran out of that restaurant, nearly knocking over a busboy in my haste. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock my rental car. The parking lot seemed too bright, too exposed. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Tom following me. I drove around for hours trying to think, taking random turns and doubling back, making sure I wasn't being followed. The city lights blurred past my windows as I tried to process what had just happened. How had my life gotten to this point? All because I'd rejected some creep when I was 8 years old. One moment, one decision, and it had haunted me ever since. I pulled into a parking lot behind a 24-hour grocery store and called my sister. My hands were still trembling as I scrolled through my contacts. Barbara, I need your help. She could tell something was wrong immediately. She always could, even when we were kids. What happened? Are you okay? I told her everything. About Tom, about the photos, about the blackmail. The words tumbled out in a rush, barely making sense even to me. She was quiet for a long time. So long I thought the call had dropped. Come stay with me, she finally said, her voice tight with anger. We'll figure this out together. But I couldn't drag her into this mess. Tom had made it clear he'd go after my family if I didn't cooperate. The thought of him anywhere near Barbara made me physically ill. I can't. He knows where you live. Barbara got angry then, really angry. I could picture her pacing her kitchen, her free hand clenched into a fist. I don't care. This guy has been terrorizing you for years. Enough is enough. She was right, but I was scared. Tom had already ruined so much of my life. I couldn't let him hurt my family too. I went back to my hotel and started packing, throwing things haphazardly into my suitcase. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. Maybe if I left the country completely, he wouldn't be able to find me. But even as I threw clothes into my suitcase, I knew it was pointless. He'd found me in Prague. He'd found me in Tokyo. He'd found me on a different continent. He'd always find me. My phone buzzed. Another text from Tom. A photo of my sister leaving her office, taken from across the street. She was checking her phone, completely unaware she was being watched. The message said, TikTok Emma. I sat on the bed and cried. Real real ugly crying. The kind where snot runs down your face and you can't breathe. The kind where your whole body shakes and you make these horrible gasping sounds. When I finally stopped, I looked at myself in the mirror. My makeup was ruined. Black streaks of mascara painting lines down my cheeks. I looked pathetic, weak, exactly how Tom wanted me to feel. That's when something inside me snapped. A switch flipped. 20 years of fear crystallized into something harder, sharper. I was done being afraid, done running, done letting this creep control my life. I splashed cold water on my face and opened my laptop. The hotel Wi-Fi was slow, but it would have to do. Tom might be good with technology, but so was I. He'd taught me well, in a twisted way. All those years of staying one step ahead of him had honed my skills. It took me 3 hours, but I finally found what I was looking for. Tom's social media accounts, the real ones, not the sanitized versions he showed most people. His work information, his address, a high-rise downtown of course, his family members. If he wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. I started screenshotting everything, every post, every photo, every comment, building my own arsenal. Then I called my friend Angela. She worked in IT and owed me a favor from when I'd helped her through her divorce. I need help backing up some files, I told her, trying to keep my voice steady, and maybe recovering some deleted stuff. Angela didn't ask questions. She just told me to bring my laptop over. While she worked her magic, fingers flying over the keyboard, I told her about Tom. She got this look on her face, recognition mixed with disgust. Wait, Tom Williams? Tall guy? Dark hair? Works at that tech company downtown? I nodded, my stomach sinking. That creep tried to hire me last year, gave me the worst vibes, kept asking personal questions during the interview, nothing to do with the job. I turned down the position even though the pay was amazing. Angela pulled up something on her computer, angling the screen so I could see. Look at this. It was Tom's company directory, complete with photos and job titles. See how many women work in his department? I counted. 0. Not a single one. He only hires men. There have been 3 harassment complaints filed against him, but they all got buried. My friend in HR told me about it. My heart started racing. This was bigger than just me. Can you get me copies of those complaints? Angela smiled, a predatory grin that reminded me why we were friends. Already on it. We worked until almost midnight, fueled by coffee and righteous anger. Angela recovered dozens of old messages from Tom that I thought I'd deleted years ago. Threats he'd sent me over the years, each one carefully worded to skirt the line of legality. Photos he'd taken of me without my knowledge, at coffee shops, at the gym, walking down the street, even some emails he'd sent to my old employers spreading lies about me. One claimed I was unstable. Another said I had a substance problem. All sent from spoofed addresses that looked legitimate. This is enough for a restraining order, Angela said, sitting back in her chair. Hell, this is enough for criminal charges. I looked at the clock. 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes until Tom's deadline. He was expecting an answer, probably sitting somewhere watching his phone, confident I'd cave like I always had before. I picked up my phone and typed out a message. One word. No. Then I blocked his number. The little delivered notification felt like a victory. Angela gave me a high five that stung my palm. Now what? She asked. I smiled for the first time in days, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Now we make sure he can never do this to anyone else. The next morning, I woke up on Angela's couch to 50 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I knew Tom was trying to reach me, probably cycling through burner phones or using apps to generate new numbers, probably furious that I'd blocked him. Good. Let him be angry. Let him feel out of control for once. I had work to do. First stop was the police station. This time I had evidence. Lots of it. The officer I talked to, a woman about my age with kind eyes, actually took me seriously. We've had other complaints about this guy, she told me, pulling up something on her computer, but the women always dropped the charges. Moved away suddenly. We could never figure out why. I gave her everything. The recordings from dinner, the screenshots, the recovered messages, years of documentation that painted a clear picture of systematic harassment and stalking. She looked through it all with this disgusted expression, occasionally shaking her head or muttering under her breath. This goes back 20 years? I nodded. Since I was 8 years old. He asked me to be his girlfriend on the playground. I said no. He's been punishing me ever since. She shook her head. We'll get a warrant for his electronics. This kind of sustained harassment is a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Finally, someone was listening. But Tom wasn't done yet. When I got back to my hotel, my room had been ransacked. Nothing stolen, but everything thrown around. My clothes were scattered across the floor. My toiletries dumped in the bathtub. A message. He'd been here. Violated my space just because he could. The front desk swore no one had come by. Security cameras mysteriously weren't working. A technical glitch, they said. Typical Tom. Always one step ahead. Always making sure there was no proof. I packed what was left of my stuff, my hands shaking again, and went to stay with Angela. Safety in numbers. That night, Angela's apartment building lost power. Just her floor. The emergency exit doors wouldn't open. Their magnetic locks somehow staying engaged despite the power outage. We were trapped. I knew it was Tom. He was escalating, getting desperate. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows in the hallway as we tried door after door. We called 911, but by the time they arrived, the power was back on. No explanation, no evidence. The cops thought we were paranoid. Sometimes these things just happen, one of them said, but I knew better. Tom was showing me he could get to me anywhere. The next day, I got a package at Angela's apartment. No return address, no delivery company markings, just a plain brown box left outside the door. Inside was a flash drive and a note in Tom's neat handwriting. Last chance, Emma. Meet me tonight or everyone sees what's on this drive. My hands trembled as I plugged it into an old laptop Angela had. The drive was full of videos. Videos of me that I didn't even know existed. In my apartment, in changing rooms, even in hotel bathrooms. Timestamps going back years. He'd been watching me for years, recording recording everything. There were hundreds of files, each one a violation of my privacy. Angela looked like she was going to be sick. Her face had gone pale, her hand covering her mouth. This is beyond creepy. This is criminal. She couldn't even finish the sentence. I agreed, but I also knew Tom had probably covered his tracks. He always did. 20 years of practice had made him an expert at this. What do we do? Angela asked. I thought for a minute, staring at the screen full of evidence of Tom's obsession. Then I had an idea. A terrible, risky idea. But it might be our only shot. We give him what he wants, I said. Sort of. I unblocked Tom's number and sent him a text. Fine. You win. Where do you want to meet? He responded immediately, like he'd been waiting with his phone in his hand. An address appeared on my screen. Some cabin outside the city, up in the mountains where cell service was spotty. Of course he wanted to meet somewhere isolated, somewhere with no witnesses. But that could work in our favor too. I called Barbara and told her the plan. She thought I was crazy. You can't meet him alone. He's dangerous. This is insane, Emma. She was right, which is why I wasn't going alone. Angela had a friend named Steven who worked in private security. Big guy, former military, the kind of person you wanted on your side in a bad situation. Square jaw, alert eyes, hands that looked like they could break things. We hired him to come with us. The plan was simple. I'd go in wearing a wire, get Tom to confess everything. Steven would be right outside if things went south. Angela would be recording everything from the car with equipment she'd borrowed from work. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. Better than continuing to run. The drive to the cabin took 2 hours. 2 hours of second-guessing myself. 2 hours of wondering if this was the dumbest thing I'd ever done. The city gave way to suburbs, then farmland, then forest. The roads got narrower, windier, but I was tired of being afraid, tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder. This ended tonight one way or another. Steven checked the wire one more time, making sure it was secure and transmitting clearly. You sure about this? He asked. His voice was gentle despite his intimidating appearance. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Just be ready if I need you. The cabin was exactly what I expected. Isolated, creepy, the perfect place for Tom's final power play. It sat at the end of a long dirt driveway, surrounded by dark trees. His car was already there, a black BMW because of course it was. I could see lights on inside, warm yellow glow against the darkness. I took a deep breath, tasting pine and cold mountain air, and walked up to the door. It opened before I could knock. Tom stood there with that same creepy smile, wearing a button-down shirt and slacks like this was a date. I knew you'd come around, he said. You always were smart. Inside the cabin was weirdly normal, like a regular vacation rental. Tom had set up dinner for two on a small wooden table, candles and everything, wine chilling in a bucket, like this was some romantic date instead of blackmail. The normalcy of it made it worse somehow. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair. We have a lot to discuss. I sat down across from him. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it, but I kept my face calm. Years of practice had taught me to hide my fear. I needed him to think he'd won. I've waited so long for this, Tom said, his eyes never leaving my face. He poured wine into 2 glasses, the liquid catching the candlelight. I didn't touch mine. 20 years, Emma. Do you know what it's like to love someone for 20 years and have them reject you? I wanted to scream that he didn't love me, that this was obsession, stalking, mental illness, but I bit my tongue. I needed him to keep talking. Needed him to confess everything while the wire was recording. I've done everything for you, he continued, taking a sip of his wine. Kept you safe, made sure you didn't end up with the wrong guys, protected you from making mistakes. I almost laughed at the delusion. Protected me? You ruined my life. Tom shook his head sadly, like I was a child who didn't understand. I saved you. From mediocrity. From settling for less than you deserve, less than me. He pulled out his phone and showed me more videos. His personal collection. See? I've documented our entire journey. Every moment. Every milestone. Our children will love seeing how their parents got together. Now I did laugh. I couldn't help it. The sound echoed in the small cabin. Children? Tom, this isn't a love story. This is stalking. This is criminal. His face darkened, the mask slipping for just a moment. Don't say that. You don't mean that. I decided to push harder. Get him to admit everything while I had the chance. How did you do it? The college expulsion. The job losses. How did you manage all of it? Tom's ego won out. He loved showing off how clever he was. Always had, even as a kid. The college was easy. Fake emails from your account, some photoshopped pictures, a few rumors in the right ears. Your high school was even easier. Just had to convince them you were selling substances, planted some pills in your locker, made an anonymous tip. And my jobs? I prompted, trying to keep the disgust out of my voice. Tom smiled, warming to his topic. Anonymous complaints, health code violations. Sometimes I'd hack your email and send inappropriate messages to coworkers. Remember that job in Phoenix? I got you fired in 3 days. Personal record. He was so proud of himself. Like ruining my life was some kind of achievement. Some twisted game where only he knew the rules. What about the restraining order I tried to get? How did you make that go away? Tom laughed. Actually laughed. My uncle is a judge. He owed me a favor. Made sure your case never got past the initial filing. Told the cops you were just some girl with a crush making up stories. They ate it up. You should have seen your face when they dismissed it. I felt sick. All these years I'd blamed myself for not trying harder, but the system had been rigged against me from the start. And tonight? What's your plan for tonight? Tom stood up and walked around the table. His footsteps were heavy on the wooden floor. He sat down right next to me, too close. I could smell his cologne again, feel the heat from his body. Tonight you agree to be mine. We go back to the city together. You move in with me. We start our life together, the way it always should have been. He reached out to touch my face. I pulled back. And if I say no, his hand dropped. His expression hardened. Then I release everything, but not just online. I'll send it to every employer in the country, every landlord, every dating site. You'll be unhireable, unrentable, undateable. You'll have nothing and no one, except me. I'll still take you back. I'm generous like that. I stood up, moved away away from him, needed distance. You're sick, Tom. You need help. He followed me, backed me against the wall. The wood was cold against my back. The only thing I need is you. His hand went to my throat, not squeezing, just resting there. A threat, a promise. Say yes, Emma. Say you'll be mine. I looked him right in the eyes, saw the madness there, the entitlement. 20 years of rejection crystallized into this moment. Never. That's when he snapped. His hand tightened on my throat. Not enough to really hurt, but enough to scare me. Enough to make me understand he could hurt me if he wanted to. Wrong answer. But before he could do anything else, the door burst open. Stephen came charging in like a bull, tackled Tom to the ground. They struggled for a minute, but Stephen was bigger and stronger and trained for this. Soon he had Tom pinned, one knee on his back, Tom's arms twisted behind him. You okay? Stephen asked me. I nodded, rubbing my throat. The skin felt tender. Yeah, did we get enough? Angela appeared in the doorway with her laptop, looking triumphant. Oh, we got everything. His whole confession. The assault. Everything. Crystal clear audio. Tom was struggling against Stephen's hold, his face pressed against the floor. You set me up. I smiled. Actually smiled. Yeah, I did. Guess you're not the only one who can plan ahead. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Real cops this time. Not Tom's connections. They listened to the recording, looked at all our evidence, put Tom in handcuffs. The metal clicking closed sounded like freedom. This is a mistake, he kept yelling. She's lying. She's always been a liar. You don't understand what she's like. But nobody was listening to him anymore. His power was broken. The spell was shattered. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time. His eyes were wild, desperate. This isn't over, Emma. I'll be back. I always come back. The officer shoved him into the car, not gently. Not this time, she said. With everything we have, you're looking at 20 years minimum. Stalking, harassment, assault, breaking and entering, cyber crimes. You're done. Tom's face went pale, finally understanding that he'd lost, that his obsession had finally caught up with him, that there would be no more second chances, no more clever escapes. I stood there watching the police car disappear down the dark road, its red taillights fading into the distance, 20 years of fear going with it. Angela put her arm around me. It's over, she said. It's really over. I nodded, feeling something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was called. Peace. For the first time in 20 years, I was free. The next few weeks were a blur of legal stuff. I had to testify at Tom's preliminary hearing, give depositions, meet with prosecutors. The whole thing was exhausting, but worth it. Tom's lawyer tried to paint me as some crazy ex who was making everything up, but the evidence was overwhelming. The wire recording from the cabin, the videos he'd taken of me, the recovered messages, years and years of digital stalking, all documented and verified. Angela came with me to every meeting. She'd become like my bodyguard, making sure I was never alone. Stephen even offered to do security sweeps of my new apartment for free. Turns out Tom had made a lot of enemies over the years. Women who'd worked for him and quit suddenly. Neighbors who'd gotten weird vibes. Even his own family seemed relieved he was locked up. His sister reached out to apologize, said she always knew something was off but never knew how to help. I got a new job pretty quickly. Turns out when you're not being sabotaged every few months, employers actually want to hire you. Who knew? The company was small but growing, good benefits, nice coworkers, a normal boss who didn't make my skin crawl. I even started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and casual dinners, testing the waters. It felt weird not having to look over my shoulder constantly. Then one day I got a call from the prosecutor. Tom had tried to hire someone to hurt me from jail. Another inmate snitched for a reduced sentence. They had recordings of Tom offering commissary money and outside connections in exchange for taking care of his problem. That added another 10 years to his sentence. The idiot just couldn't help himself. Even locked up, he was still trying to control me. My sister Barbara threw a party when we found out. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends at her house. We ordered pizza and drank cheap wine, and I cried happy tears for the first time in forever. My cousin Linda felt terrible about posting that pool photo. I told her it wasn't her fault. How could she have known? Tom would have found me eventually anyway. He always did. I started seeing a therapist to deal with everything. 20 years of trauma doesn't just disappear overnight. Some days were harder than others. I'd have panic attacks in crowds, jump at unexpected noises, check my locks 5 times before bed, but slowly it got better. The nightmares became less frequent. The hypervigilance faded. I started to feel like a normal person again. 6 months later, I was at a coffee shop when I saw a familiar face. Tom's nephew, the kid from the pool. He was with his mom, Tom's sister. She recognized me and came over looking embarrassed. The kid didn't remember me at all. I'm so sorry, she said, about everything. I had no idea what Tom was really like, what he made my son do. I told her it wasn't the kid's fault. He was just following his uncle's instructions. Kids do that. She told me Tom had been writing her letters from prison, crazy rambling things about destiny and true love and how I'd eventually come around. She'd stopped reading them, stopped visiting. Their whole family had basically disowned him. He was always odd, she said, even as a kid, possessive, controlling. We thought he'd grow out of it. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The trial itself was anticlimactic. Tom's lawyer convinced him to take a plea deal. 25 years with possibility of parole in 15. The prosecutor wanted to go for more but said this was a sure thing. No risk of a sympathetic jury. No chance of him walking on a technicality. I agreed. I just wanted it over. Wanted to move on with my life without this hanging over me. I was there when they read the sentence. Tom looked different in his orange jumpsuit. Smaller somehow. Less intimidating. He tried to make eye contact, but I wouldn't look at him. Didn't want to give him even that small victory. When the judge read the sentence, his shoulders slumped. Reality finally hitting him. He was going to spend the best years of his life in a cell. Good. After the sentencing, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I went back to my hometown, visited all the places Tom had ruined for me, my old high school, the college that expelled me, the park where he first asked me out when I was 8. I reclaimed each space, made new memories to to override the bad ones. It felt like closing a chapter, like exorcism, but less dramatic. I ran into my high school principal at the grocery store. He looked older, grayer. When he saw me, his face went red. "Emma, I heard about what happened with that Williams boy. I'm so sorry. If we'd known." I just nodded and walked away. His apology meant nothing now. The damage was done, but at least other girls would be safe from Tom. That counted for something. My ex-boyfriend tried to reach out once Tom's case made the local news. Sent me this long text about how sorry he was for not believing me, how he should have known I was telling the truth. I didn't respond. He'd shown me who he was when things got hard. When I needed him most, he'd laughed in my face, called me a liar. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding. A year after Tom's arrest, I got a letter forwarded from my old address. No return name, but I recognized the handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I still think about you every day. We're meant to be together, Emma. I'll wait for you, however long it takes. Forever yours, Tom." I took the letter straight to the police. Turns out he'd been bribing guards to mail things for him. Added another 5 years to his sentence. Angela and I became even closer through everything. She'd joke that Tom had given me one good thing, a best friend who'd literally fight crime with me. We'd get drinks every Friday and toast to freedom and friendship and Tom rotting in jail. She was dating Steven now. They made a cute couple. He was teaching her self-defense. She was teaching him how to relax. I moved to a new apartment closer to work. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. Hung pictures on the walls. Bought plants I probably wouldn't keep alive. Adopted a cat who hated everyone but me. Normal life stuff. The kind of things you can't do when you're always ready to run. When you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes I'd forget about Tom for days at a time. Then something would remind me. A cologne smell. A black BMW. Someone walking too close behind me on the street. The fear would spike for a second before I remembered. He's locked up. He can't hurt me anymore. The relief was better than any substance. Better than therapy even. Just knowing he was behind bars where he belonged. 2 years after his arrest, I was promoted to manager at work. My boss said I was one of the most reliable employees they'd ever had. I almost laughed. If only they knew how unreliable my life had been before. How many jobs I'd lost. How many times I'd had to start over. But that was the past. This was my future. A future Tom couldn't touch. I started volunteering at a women's shelter. Talking to other stalking victims. Sharing my story. Helping them navigate the legal system. Showing them it was possible to fight back and win. Some of their stories were worse than mine. Some were scarily similar. But all of them were survivors. All of them were stronger than their stalkers thought. One woman asked me if I ever regretted saying no to Tom when I was 8. If I ever wondered how different life would have been if I'd just said yes. I told her the truth. Not for a single second. Even knowing what he'd put me through. Even knowing the years of pain that followed. 8-year-old me had been right to trust her instincts. To say no to something that felt wrong. 3 years post-arrest, I was at Angela's wedding. Steven looked nervous in his tux. Angela looked radiant in her dress. I gave a speech about how they'd met. How they'd saved me from my stalker and found love in the process. Everyone cried. Even Steven's tough military buddies. It was beautiful. The kind of happy ending Tom had tried to steal from me. I caught the bouquet because Angela basically threw it directly at my face. Everyone laughed. The photographer got a great shot of me looking shocked with flowers smacking me in the nose. Later that night, I met Jonathan. He was Steven's cousin. Funny, kind, had never heard of Tom Williams. We talked until the venue kicked us out, exchanged numbers, made plans for coffee. Dating Jonathan was easy in a way I'd forgotten relationships could be. No drama, no red flags, no possessive behavior, just two people getting to know each other, building something real. He didn't treat me like I was broken, didn't need to know every detail of my past, just accepted that I'd been through something hard and come out the other side. We'd been together 6 months when I finally told him the whole story. About Tom, about the stalking, about everything. He listened without interrupting, held my hand when I started crying. When I finished, he just said, "I'm glad you're safe now." No judgment, no weird questions, no making it about him, just support, understanding, love. The parole board contacted me 5 years into Tom's sentence. He was applying for early release, model prisoner apparently, taking classes, leading therapy groups, acting reformed. They wanted my victim impact statement. I spent weeks writing it, detailing everything he'd done, the jobs lost, the relationships ruined, the years of fear, the therapy bills, the life stolen. They denied his parole, would review again in 5 years. I married Jonathan on a beach in Florida. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Angela was my maid of honor. She ugly cried through the whole thing. Barbara walked me down the aisle since our parents were gone. It was perfect. The exact opposite of whatever twisted fantasy Tom had built in his head. Real love instead of obsession. Partnership instead of control. We bought a house in the suburbs. Nothing fancy but ours. I planted a garden that actually grew things. Jonathan built a deck. We got a second cat who also hated everyone but me. Normal married life. Sometimes I'd catch myself waiting for something bad to happen. For Tom to somehow ruin this too. Then I'd remember. He's locked up. He has no power here. This life is mine. 10 years after his arrest, I got another letter. The prison return address made my stomach drop. But it wasn't from Tom. It was from his cellmate. Tom had died. Heart attack in his cell. Age 47. They found stacks of letters under his mattress. All addressed to me. All unsent. The cellmate thought I should know. Thought it might give me closure. I sat with that letter for a long time, waiting to feel something. Relief, sadness, anger, something. But all I felt was empty. Tom had wasted his entire life obsessing over someone who never wanted him. Died alone in a cell surrounded by unsent letters to a woman who'd moved on. It was pathetic. Sad in a way that had nothing to do with me. I told Jonathan that night. He held me while I processed it. Asked if I wanted to go to the funeral. I laughed at that. Actually laughed. No way was I giving Tom that final victory. Showing up to mourn the man who'd terrorized me for decades. His family could bury him. him. Or not. I didn't care. He was gone, and that was all that mattered. Life went on. Jonathan and I had a daughter. Named her after my mom. She's 5 now. Strong-willed and stubborn and perfect. Sometimes I watch her playing and think about 8-year-old me. How one no had shaped my entire life. I'm teaching her to trust her instincts. To say no when something feels wrong. To never let anyone make her feel guilty for protecting herself. I still volunteer at the shelter when I can. Still share my story. Tom is gone, but there are other Toms out there. Other women living in fear. Running from shadows. Rebuilding their lives over and over. I tell them it gets better. That they can fight back. That stalkers aren't invincible. They're just broken people who can't handle rejection. Sometimes new volunteers ask how I stayed so strong through it all. How I survived 20 years of stalking. I tell them the truth. I didn't feel strong. Most days I felt terrified, exhausted, ready to give up. But I kept going anyway. One day at a time. One small victory at a time. Until those small victories added up to freedom. Last week I was at the grocery store with my daughter when I saw Tom's sister again. She looked older, tired. She recognized me and started to walk away, but I called out to her. Told her I was sorry for her loss. She looked surprised. After everything he did to you? I shrugged. He was still her brother. Still someone she'd grown up with. Grieving is complicated. We talked for a few minutes. She told me Tom never stopped talking about me, even at the end. The guards found journals full of my name, plans for when he got out, fantasies about our life together. She'd tried to get him help, but he refused. Insisted I was his destiny, his soulmate, that I'd come around eventually. Even dying, he believed that. My daughter tugged on my hand, ready to go. I said goodbye to Tom's sister and we left. In the car, my daughter asked who that lady was. I told her just someone I used to know. The simple truth, because that's all Tom was now. Someone I used to know. Someone who used to have power over me. Used to make me afraid, but not anymore. Never again. Looking back, I probably should have seen the signs earlier. The intensity, the possessiveness, the inability to accept no. But I was 8. He was 12. I thought we were friends. Thought he'd grow out of his crush. Move on like normal people do. Instead, he let it consume him. Let rejection turn into obsession. Wasted his whole life trying to force something that was never there. These days, I barely think about him. Whole weeks go by without his name crossing my mind. I'm too busy living the life he tried to steal. Raising my daughter, loving my husband, working at a job I actually enjoy, tending my garden that somehow hasn't died yet, being normal, being free, being everything Tom never wanted me to be, myself. Sometimes people ask if I regret going to that cabin, putting myself in danger to catch him. I always say no. It was worth the risk to end it, to stop running, to take back control. Tom thought he was luring me into a trap. Really, I was luring him, using his arrogance against him, letting him think he'd won right up until the handcuffs clicked. My therapist says I've processed the trauma well, integrated it into my story without letting it define me. I like that. Tom was a chapter in my life. A long, horrible chapter. But not the whole book. Not the ending. Just something that happened that made me stronger. Made me appreciate normal life more. Made me value the people who actually love me. I'm 35 now. Tom's been dead for 2 years. I have the life I always wanted. The life he tried so hard to prevent. A loving family, real friends, a stable job, a house with a garden that's only half dead, 2 cats who tolerate me, in-laws who actually like me, the kind of boring, beautiful life that makes a good story unnecessary. Sometimes young women reach out after hearing my story, asking for advice about their own stalkers. I always tell them the same thing. Document everything. Tell everyone. Don't try to handle it alone. And never, ever blame yourself for saying no. You have the right to reject someone, to not return their feelings, to live your life without fear. Anyone who can't accept that isn't worth your time. I think about that 8-year-old girl sometimes, standing on the playground, holding dead flowers from a boy too old to be interested, knowing something was wrong even if she couldn't name it, saying no even though it would have been easier to say yes. I'm proud of her. Proud she trusted her gut. Proud she didn't let politeness override her instincts. Tom died believing we were meant to be together, that I was his soulmate, his destiny, his one true love. He never understood that love requires 2 people, that you can't force someone to feel something they don't, that rejection isn't a challenge to overcome. It's an answer to accept. He wasted 47 years learning that lesson, and in the end, he never learned it at all. But that's not my problem anymore. Never was, really. I've got a life to live, a daughter to raise, a husband to love, a garden to pretend I know how to maintain, 2 cats to feed, a job to do, friends to see, a future to build. All the normal, boring, beautiful things Tom tried to take from me. All the things that matter more than one broken man's obsession. My story could have ended differently. I could have given in, said yes to make him stop, lived whatever twisted life he'd planned for us. But I didn't. I said no at 8 and kept saying it for 20 years, until finally the world heard me, believed me, helped me. And now he's gone and I'm still here, living proof that stalkers don't always win, that victims can become survivors, that no means no, even if it takes decades to enforce it. So that's my story. Girl meets boy, girl rejects boy. Boy spends 20 years stalking girl. Girl finally gets evidence and boy goes to prison forever. Boy dies alone surrounded by unsent love letters. Girl lives happily ever after with someone who actually respects her boundaries. Not exactly a fairy tale, but close enough. The kind of ending Tom never saw coming. The kind where I win.